Here it comes.
3Practice circles begin with a framing question and a volunteer who takes up to 2 minutes to answer.
This is our framing question tonight. With liberty and justice for all, how
has systemic racism affected persons?
Who are they to you, and what are you afraid they'd do if they thought they could get away with it?
I'll start.
With much trepidation, I'll go first.
I'll do my best. You got 2 minutes.
Rob, you have 2 minutes to share your statement.
When the volunteer finishes, anyone may ask a clarifying question, beginning with the words, "I'd be curious to know."
I'd be curious to know.
I'd be curious to know.
Bob, I'd be curious to know.
Daniel, I'd be curious to know.
I'd be curious to know.
No one has to speak. We don't call on people or take polls or go around the circle. We end by thanking others for something they said, or the way they said it, or simply for showing up.
I want to say thanks to Vic. I think he brought up a lot of good points, and I appreciated your last question.
I want to say thank you to Helen for giving voice to mourning.
I thank everybody for expressing their opinion. It's been challenging at times, but it's always interesting.
I also want to thank Fred and Pejman and Matthew for their really measured responses to difficult questions.
I just want to thank you tonight. Your questions were so clear.
I'd like to thank every single person actually that was in this call. I feel like everybody in politics doesn't care about, the 18, 19-year-olds of this world.
I really appreciated the way that you took your own unique experience and tried to think about how that related to this very large question.
The goal in 3Practice circles is not agreement. Our goal is clarity. We help folks hear what their neighbors on the other side really mean. Getting clear about that helps us decide how we want to treat each other going forward, which we think in a democracy is time well spent.
Okay. So we should be back from the explainer video. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what the 3 practices are. So here they are. 1, I'll be unusually interested in others. 2, I'll stay in the room with difference. And 3, I'll stop comparing my best with your worst. Agreement is not one of the practices. What we're looking for in 3Practices circles is clarity about what others think and feel and want. This is not a discussion, a debate, or a dialogue group. It's a workout that prepares us to hear and see things we might otherwise miss, or things that might trigger us in the real world. You can relax, no one will call on you. We won't go around the circle or take polls, as we said in the video. You decide if and when you want to talk. And it's fine to turn off your video or slip out if you want to. And just so you know, we do record 3Practice circles for learning purposes, but we won't make what you say public without your permission. And Christy, our head ref, is going to be starting and stopping the recording. If you do take your 2 minutes to share, nobody will interrupt you, because we're here to practice listening with genuine curiosity to what people say, even if we don't like it. As we go, feel free to jot down notes to help you remember a question or something you want to say if you decide to take your 2 minutes. It's handy to jot down notes for the thank you session afterwards. Our head referee is Christy Harrison, and she'll explain additional rules as we go. Take it away, Christy.
Thanks, Teresa. And we've placed the framing question in the chat a couple of times, but I'm dropping it in there just one last time. This circle will, as Teresa shared with us, help us gain clarity about the values of people whose opinions or beliefs or lived experiences may be different than our own. And a volunteer can respond to the framing question for up to 2 minutes with a personal opinion or a story. Now, following that, anyone may ask a clarifying question. So for the record, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, is not a clarifying question. Okay, the most important rule is that each clarifying question must begin with the phrase, "I'd be curious to know." So something that's typical that we do just for practice, if you can, press that unmute bar for just a second, and with me at the count of 3, let's all say, "I'd be curious to know." 1, 2, 3. I'd be curious to know. That's the phrase. Okay. So the primary skill that we'll practice in the circle is learning to ask questions that are genuinely curious and that get to the point as quickly as in as few words as possible. So let me say that again. The primary skill we'll practice in any 3Practice circle is asking questions that are genuinely curious and that get to the point in as few words as possible. For example, it's fair play to ask a question like, "I'd be curious to know how you think that sounds to a woman or a person of color or an immigrant," or whatever fits, as long as it's genuinely curious and gets straight to the point. It's a big part of my job is helping you work on that skill. So if I need to lend a hand if you're having trouble finding your question, I may jump in and just help and just offer a little support in that way. Following each clarifying question, the volunteer then has 1 minute to respond. And you may ask one follow-up question also, if you wish, if you're the questioner. Now, you can tell that I am the head ref because I have this clock, which I'll try to keep centered in the front of my body so that we can see it. And see, okay. And it's not about power. The clock is not about power. In fact, oftentimes, especially with this decolonizing title, we often hear from people, it's about fair play. It'll help you keep track of your time, and I'll be able to tell you when your 2 minutes are up. So let me know if you can't see the clock. If I need to adjust it, I'll do that. Don't be surprised if there are periods of silence. We'll sit with it a while we wait for people to find their voice, to perhaps ask their question or to share their 2 minutes if they choose to. When you're ready to ask your question, raise your hand so I can see you. If you know how to find the raise hand button, it's fine to use that feature in the dashboard. Again, we're not going to call anybody. We're not going to go around in circle, make sure everybody takes a turn, not at all. And it's okay to leave your camera off. It's frequently done. And it's okay to just listen. Okay. So when you're ready to ask your question, raise your hand. And one more thing, when I say thank you, what I really mean is, time's up, please stop talking. So I'll repeat that. If I say thank you, I generally do mean thank you. Thank you for engaging with us, but also that time's up and let's stop. And I'll explain a few more rules as we go along if I need to, but that's really enough for now. Is there a volunteer who'd like to respond to the framing question of here's why a decolonized curriculum is important to me, and take their 2 minutes? Oh, June, yay. First time and jumping in. I love it. Please.
I would be curious to know.
Oh, June, this is your time to take 2 minutes to say whatever you like about the question. Here's why a decolonized curriculum, if you'd like to do that.
Okay, yes. All right. So decolonized curriculum is important to me because I believe that Fielding seeks and has a very diverse student body. And the people like myself, I'm an alumni, who come to Fielding are seeking research topics that respect and want to understand more deeply different viewpoints, and particularly viewpoints that come perhaps from their own backgrounds, that diverse backgrounds. So I think living up to our social justice mission is not just about accepting students that have diverse backgrounds, but helping them to realize their potential in their research and scholarly work with a decolonized curriculum.
Thank you. You still have the floor if you'd like to take it, or if you'd like to let it rest there, give me a signal. Okay. All right. Thank you, June. clarifying questions for June.
June, I'd be curious to know what your dissertation was.
Oh, well, my dissertation was on the topic of intercultural competence, and specifically in cultural intelligence, and how successful or not successful a multicultural class was in improving cultural intelligence of those students. So I used the cultural intelligence scale. And it was mixed method.
Daniel, clarifying question or a follow-up question?
Thank you. Just a quick one. I'd be curious to know major findings, what you found from it.
Oh, well, the interesting thing is, it's probably not going to be a revelation to you all, but that it was transformational learning, that the qualitative piece, mixed method. So the qualitative piece of the research informed the quantitative, and that most of the findings on the qualitative side, the students said they had transformational learning experiences that basically changed their lives and how they thought. And that's why they felt that the class was really beneficial. And I think the exercises that I used were some of the best practices from the literature search that I did. So I think it has to do with facilitation, but it also has to do with
Thank you, June. I'd be curious to know if you had, this is where I, as the timekeeper, I get to introduce another rule. I'd be curious to know, June, if you had another 30 seconds, how would you finish that thought?
I'm done. Sorry, rambled a bit.
Oh, okay. Okay, didn't want to cut you off. So this first interjection has kind of given us a sense of it, and I'm going to turn off the recording and at least pause the recording now, so that if other kinds of questions would like to come forward, this gives us a taste of it, and we'll turn it back on in a bit when we get to the closing and the thank you time period. Okay, so about that, I wish I'd had a lot of that recorded. Yeah, so we end 3Practice circles with thank yous to people who made us think or encouraged us by something that they said or the way that they said it, especially if they demonstrated unusual curiosity or staying in the room with difference or resisting the impulse to compare their best with other people's worst. I'd open this space, and we can all take ourselves off of mute. We can just jump in here. We can take turns. We can do whatever we want. But I'd like to begin by thanking the people who took their 2 minutes, and for June for going first. That's a tricky space to be in. So I very much appreciate that. So I'll say that. What other thank yous, Teresa? Oh, Teresa's like the thank you wizard.
I love this particular group because I learn, it's like I'm going to school. So I jot down some of the things that I've learned. So I'd like to thank June for giving great examples of transformational learning experiences. It's a new term for me. I'd like to thank Daniel for responding with vulnerability to personal question. Thank you. I'd like to thank Michael Ann for informative response about compassionate correction in writing. Wow. I'd like to thank Keely for emphasizing how inclusion facilitates development of better critical thinking. Cool. And for describing how we need diversity in math. I'd also like to thank Marie for asking really good, tight, I'd be curious to know questions.
June, please.
I would like to thank Daniel and Michael Ann and Keely for bucking the trends and probably taking more heat than is fair, given what they were trying to do in their classrooms, and being brave people, because I know that not everybody, I mean, someone lives in Texas. I mean, not everybody agrees that this is the right thing to do. And having transformational learning experiences in the classroom requires you to come into the classroom thinking one way and be willing to leave the classroom to think that that truth might not be true anymore. And I do think there's a lot of people who don't want that to happen. And so you are being very brave people in creating a safe space for your students to make that happen, despite it not being safe for you, possibly. So thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Other thank yous.
I'd like to just echo June and a heartfelt thank you to the educators on the call, Daniel, Michael, and Keely, anybody else that I may have missed, just because the work that you're doing is so unbelievably foundationally important to the health of us as a society. And it's, I can't imagine that you get to hear thank you as often as you should. So I wanted to echo June in that.
I do have one more thank you, and that's to Christy for being very generous with the clock. Way to go.
Yes. Especially in this framework, right? Thank you. And I'd like to thank the people who came and the people who asked questions and the people who listened, simply listened. It's okay to stay off camera and listen. And I certainly learned some terms and some concepts. So there's great value in listening. So thank you for that. And thank you to Teresa for coming and co-roughing with me at this time. Other thank yous? Marie?
Thank you, Christy, and sincerely thank you very much, you and Teresa. I am leaving this conversation more encouraged than I thought I'd be, because I thought we weren't decolonizing curricula very well at all anywhere. And it turns out that there are at least three people on this call who are doing it, and they're doing it in ways that are making a big difference for their students, and there's ripples around them that are making differences for their organization. So I'm extremely encouraged, and I would wish we had another discussion about how to bring these ideas to fielding in a more vibrant, deliberate way. So I just want to thank our speakers, our speakers today, for that hopefulness and for being willing to share their experiences. It was transformational, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Marie, for saying that. I'd like to thank you too for thinking about how to synthesize, and that we can have another circle about just that topic. Because as they were listening, I kept thinking, how can we apply this to fielding? So thank you for stirring some ideas. If there are no other immediate thank yous right this second, we still have time. With that, the circle, this is how a circle runs, a 3Practice circle. It's officially over, but if you have time for a short visit, or if you want to ask questions, we'll stick around for a few minutes. We don't relitigate if there's been something controversial or something said, but if you'd like to hang out a few minutes, get to know some folks, feel free, ask a few more questions that we're thinking about where to go forward. Please feel free to do that. And oftentimes we call it an after party. Okay, and the after party can typically last 5-15. Every once in a while it lasts a long time, depending on the topic. And we'll also drop some links in the chat to the 3Practice organization that has 3Practice circles almost all the time. And also Daniel, our own fielding, has a fielding 3Practice circle going on Friday evening. So Daniel, you might want to drop any information in there about that as well. So the officially closed, and it's an after party. We can just chit chat.
I hope I can meet you all in person one day. So
June, I wanted to thank you too, June. Thank you for being brave. You're a university leader at fielding now. So thanks for coming in and seeing what's going on and being involved.
Oh, well, actually, Marie and my heart is with the Inclusion Council and I can't be on it anymore. So I'm super sad. So it's so great to see Marie. I used to see her more often when I was part of the Inclusion Council. And so I am so happy to see, people from all over the country on this call. And as a leader, I'm super proud to be representing Fielding doing the right thing.
And June, this is Marie. Do you see, let me ask you as a Fielding leader, do you see promise in this format for spurring discussion among Fielding students and faculty and alumni around this topic?
Yes, because I'm going to take you back to 2007, 8, and 9 when I was, and 10 when I was the chair of the Equity Council, and people used to say that sessions were it was a equity issue because to go to session in person was a lot of money.
Right.
And that students, not all students, and very few students actually have a lot of money in the EDD program. And so I actually think virtual format for people in education who have limited budgets, this is a equity issue. How do we get to network with our colleagues and not spend, $2,000 flying all over the place, right? It's not as good as meeting you all in person, but it's better than not meeting you at all. And this was a great format. I thought it was cool. So I don't know. We've tried to do some of these courageous conversations, right, Marie, in person and otherwise. And I thought this worked out really well. Nice job, Christy.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Well, and that's partly why Marie thought to ask if we could be included in this conference, just to demonstrate the technique as well as the content. It can go anywhere. And if you decide to click on the 3Practice link, upcoming circles, you'll see the variety of where it goes and where people are having these conversations.
And I'm honestly, I'm dying to get to know Keely because, I was the only CPA MBA in my cohort when I was in the doctoral program, and you're a lawyer, and that's pretty unusual in business, right?